All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Colton Posey Fishing. So today we're going to be talking about jigs. So I've got a question here recently from several people asking about how to fish jigs and what jigs are for what situation. I'm going to go over all that here in just a minute. So make sure to like and subscribe for more content, especially if you're interested in how-to fishing tips or any kind of thing, seasonal patterns or anything like that. We've also got members only now, so if you're interested in that, it's $2 a month. You get my content early. If you can do it, great. If you can't, still great. I appreciate you stopping by, so stay tuned. This is something you don't want to miss. All right, everybody, so today we're going to be talking about jigs, and jigs is one of my favorite things to use, period. I've made more money off of jigs than anything else. I throw it year-round, winter, spring, summer, fall, whole 9 yards. I love jigs. So let's go ahead and talk about the setup, because it's going to be the most important thing. Like I always say, use whatever jig or whatever kind of rod you can afford. It doesn't really matter. I run a Ducket Triad. Just get you whatever you can get to get you on the water and get to practicing with a jig. But 7'3" medium heavy fast action tip, that's typically what I like to use. The 7'3", it gives me an accurate cast. I can make long casts if I'm fishing points. Whatever I need to do, I can take up a lot of line, especially if you're used to slack lining on slow moving baits. So the 7'3" will take up plenty of line, and then obviously your reel is going to be a big key part. This is a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio. It is a faster reel, but it's still got a lot of good torque to it. I like it a little bit, especially during the summer when I'm popping a jig, and we're going to go over exactly what popping a jig and stuff like that is. But 7'3" medium heavy fast action tip, 7.5 to 1 or anything under a 7.5 to 1 is a great gear ratio. Anything with a lot of torque, good drag system. I use Daiwa. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but Daiwa 7'3" Ducket Triad. All right, so now for the jigs. Let's go over one of the main jigs that I use a lot, especially if you're fishing river systems, a lot of wood cover or anything like that. This is a War Eagle Finesse jig. It's a heavy finesse. It's got a real thick weed guard. It's a ball head. It doesn't have a 90-degree line tie, although it does go through wood and rock very well. It also goes through grass pretty well, as long as it's none of that mucky, thick grass that just kind of sticks to everything. But either way, the ball head, this right here, typically spring, fall, winter, I'm typically dragging this jig. So I'm picking up my rod tip, slowly pulling it towards me, and then as that bait goes up or it's just dragging across the bottom, I'll let my rod tip down, reel up my slack line, pick up, do the same thing. That's typically the way I work this during those times of years. Now, during the summer, I'm popping a jig. You got to remember, during the summer months, the fish's metabolisms are up real high. So typically what happens is the bait and stuff that they're eating, they're moving a lot faster. So with them moving a lot faster, you have to mimic that to make your presentation more natural to get the fish to bite. So by doing a pop with a jig, you're simply taking your rod tip. If I've got my rod in my hand, I'm simply reeling it. And then as soon as I get all my slack out, I'm popping that jig just like that. Okay, and what it does, it gives it a hopping action. Okay, and then it does the fall. And I'm doing that quickly, so I'm pop, reeling slack, pop, slack, and just continuing with that process when I'm popping a jig. But your ball head jig, the War Eagle Heavy Finesse, this is one I use. Use whatever you want to use, but this is the one that I use. It does go through cover very well. They're fairly inexpensive. It's a very good bait. All right, now another jig we're going to talk about. This is the G-Money Arky jig, but they're also called Finesse jigs by other jig companies. But it's got a great weed guard and stuff on it, so it's good as far as like going through grass and stuff like that. Although this jig has kind of got a flat head on it. I know y'all seen it before. It's got that weird looking little flat head. And what this bait does, it's very unique when you get around docks and stuff. So if you're fishing a lake with tons of docks or somewhere where fish are typically on docks, you can actually skip this bait very easily up under docks, just like you would a fluke, wacky rig, or anything like that, whatever you typically skip with. But you can use this bait to get in the heavy cover, and you're going to use the same action. Typically I will do a slow reel or a slow drag. During the summer I'm still popping the bait, either way, this is a good option as far as like getting around grass and docks. It's a wonderful option. All right, the next one is the most typical jig that most people use. It's called a football head. So, you know, it's got the football shape on the head. This is a G-Money jig, and this is a 90-degree line tie. I've used these jigs pretty much ever since I've been fishing. I absolutely love them. They don't get hung up as much. They got the rubber skirt. It's just a good jig. I have a lot of confidence in it. But either way, this jig, you're going to work it the same way. You're going to do a drag sometimes, and then the other times, like during the summer when the fish are very, very active, you can do that popping action. All right, now talking about the big jigs, this is typically one like I would use on like Guntersville Lake or something like that. It's huge jigs, 3/4 ounce mop jig. The mop jig, it's got kind of a flat head on it, but it's still got that football head shape, but it sits flat on the bottom once it lands, and then the skirt flares out. It gives a really, really big profile in the water. That big profile typically attracts bigger fish, especially ones that are eating big crawdads and stuff like that. And I use this one the same way, drag or a pop. Now, one of my favorite ones to use, especially during the spring when the grass starts finally coming up in your lake or river system, whatever you may be fishing. Lily pads is wonderful also, stump fields, anything like that is a swim jig. Your swim jig, this is the Strike King Hack Attack swim jig. I like it. It comes through cover very, very well. It's got a heavy wire hook. I typically run anywhere from 20 to 25 pound test on this jig. But either way, it's a very, very good option, especially when you're trying to get around, you know, heavy cover as far as grass, wood, rock, docks, anything that you can do to get this bait in. It's typically going to catch you fish. It's kind of a glorified swim bait head, if that makes sense. So I'm typically using a slow reel with this bait. Super simple, slow reel. If the fish are very, very active and that water temperature jumps up in the 70s, I'm burning it. It's a super fast reel. Then I'll typically put my Kitex on something like this instead of my Rage Swimmer or something like that. But a slow reel when the water temperatures are kind of below that 70 mark, when the fish are still kind of slow, and then, you know, speed that retrieve up as soon as the fish get real active. Wonderful in grass. This is a good technique in grass. All right, so now we're going to be talking about trailers. So typically on like my swim jig and stuff like I was talking about, I'm typically going to use swim baits, okay? So with the swim bait, you rig it up just like you do a swim bait head. You're going to slide it all the way up. I'm typically using the 3.75 inch. You may have to trim a little bit off the head depending on what size jig hook you got inside the hook or the jig. But typically with the Strike King Hack Attack, I typically take about 3 ribs off of 3.75, and then it just slides right up there, boots right up real comfortable. It's got a keeper on the back, so it keep your swim bait real good and nice tight and stuff till they get to chewing on it a lot. Now, for my other jigs, like the ball head, the mop jig, the football head, and all that stuff, I'm typically using the same trailers with all these jigs. So in your cooler months, your winter and your early spring and later fall and stuff like that, I'm typically using a twin tail grub type bait, okay? So like your Berkeley Power Bait grubs or your Strike King grubs, anything like that is a wonderful trailer option, just because it doesn't have as much action as a crawl necessarily does, like a Zoom Z crawl or, you know, money crawl or something like that. So I'll typically run those types of trailers on these in the cooler months. Now, once it gets, you know, mid to late spring, once the fish are spawning and post-spawn, and then they start moving back out to their summer haunts, then typically I'm running like a Strike King crawl on this bait. And you can buy them where it's just the regular chunk that goes on, or you can buy it where it's just, you know, the whole crawl, so you have the option. I typically buy the whole crawl, and that way I can trim it off as I need it for jigs, or I can Texas rig it if I want to. That way it saves me a little bit of money. But either way, you know, Zoom Z crawls, all that stuff works. Your Young Money crawls, I've used them all. Use whatever you're comfortable with, but your crawls are going to be for your warmer months, and the techniques are going to be the same, but that'll give you trailer options. So guys, I hope the video helps you. If it does, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Either way, guys, I hope you get out there and catch more fish, and I'll see you next time.